is is accessible outside of the class. So you see, this is how classes work. Because in our CPP we scope it in and we include it, we are able to, inside of the constructor, set that private variable, or not variable, rather, data member, and change it. And, give it something, give it meaning, give it a value. So that is basically how we would do things. Now for now, we're going to ignore the destructor. That is something that we will need eventually. It's also very important, but right now the only thing we need is a constructor. So if we wanted to access our data member outside, we would do get x, and then we put this void, and then we could set the function up here and write return x, just like that. And what this is called an inline function or method. So this is how we basically get things done for classes. This is as basic as I can do it. Now I probably have lost some of you already, so feel free to ask questions. I do have a private message. You can always comment on the video, but all you need to know is this is the generic setup of a class, okay? And classes usually have a default access type of private. Meaning that everything in here is going to be like a private section. It can't be accessed outside of here. So that is why we put a public section, so that we may add everything inside of here, or outside of the class. So basically, this private isn't completely necessary, but I have it there because it helps us see that part of the class is private, and it cannot be accessed outside of the class. But generally, if it's a class, it cannot be accessed outside of the class. So now that we have all of that over with, we are going to take our modifier, Control C, put it in the CPP, and I'm going to create a body. But before we write anything inside of it, we must always remember this step, to scope it in, just like that, so that we can set x equal to whatever I is. And that would change our value. So there we have it. That is our class. So now that we have a class, we are going to include our class. Found include game, and as you can see, it already shows up here, .h. And now that we have it, we are going to do stuff with it. So the first thing we do is we declare a class object. So how do we do that? We write C game, and we'll call it game. See, this is our class name, and this is our object, or often referred to as class object. And that is how we associate these things, okay? So now that it's kind of like creating a variable. Think of your class name as kind of a data type, but we can only use this data type once this header file is included. So hopefully I haven't lost anybody yet, but basically we can access everything inside the class by using this thing called a direct membership operator, or period. And we can use, you see, we have access to these functions. It says we have access to the variable x, but no, it doesn't. If you notice, there's an icon with a little kind of lock, a master lock kind of thing, looking thing. That means we cannot access that. That means it is private and it cannot be touched outside of the class. So we can only change everything inside the class. So if we wanted to change it outside of the class, we would use set x, and it wants to take in a variable, so we would make x 6. And then if we wanted to show that it is 6 now, we would put game, and we would write get x. And we now have something to show. So I'll hit F7 to compile, F5 to run, and now we have 6. So that is basically how it works. We can even set x to 78, F7, F5, and it is now 78. That is basically how a class works. That is the gist of everything. So something that is like a class, except it has a default access type of public, is called a struct. And we can create a struct called player, and we basically set it up the same way. Oops. And so basically what we do here is we can create a function. So let's go ahead and create a function. We'll call it void I am a function, and void. And we can write the function body here, and basically we can just see out hi, just like that. And we can also put private things inside of here, but generally when we use, and then we can make this public, but everything is automatically public inside of a struct. However, it behaves the same way as a class. And we won't necessarily, typically these aren't inside of header files and CPP files. If we were to write a struct, it would probably be written in main, or it'll be written inside of another class so that we can use it. So, and now, since the struct is inside of our game class, we can just declare player and call it player, just like that. And then we can write player direct membership operator, and then I am a function. And we hit F7 to compile. Oh, something failed. Oh, it doesn't like C out. So probably because we don't have IO stream in here. And then we can put using, or instead of using namespace standard, we can also scope this in with standard, just like that. You see? Or at least I believe we can do that. Yes, we can. So that's another example of how scoping can be used. It's not just for this. We could have just as easily scoped in all of the C out right here, but we use using namespace standard because it keeps it global so that we can it always knows that we are using that.